One of the great things about using GDP as a measure of economic activity is that we can also use it to analyze different regions of a specific country or even cities and things of that nature. Here what we're doing is we're going to take a look at that, and what I've done is I've gone out to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, and I've pulled together real GDP by state from 1997 through 2013. You can see it all listed out here. That way we can get a sense for what's going on over time in the top states, and also these are currently rated, or these are sorted currently by 2013 real GDP. So let me scroll this over here real quick, and that way we can just focus in on 1 year here. And I'm going to just pull this, let me pull this over here real quick so we can look at the chart real quick. And we're going to look at this in a few different ways. But hopefully what you can see is the size of these, the size of these states, right? So you can see this is in millions, so this would be millions, billions, trillions. We're looking at $2 trillion here at this level on the y-axis, and you can see California is by far the largest state. It is one of the leading economic drivers of the United States of America, and it could stand on its own, right? It's a large state as far as population, and it's large as far as the amount of output that it puts out. And here you can also see what's going on with Texas and New York, Florida, Illinois. These are the top 10 states as of 2013 and by real GDP. There's a few things I want to point out. So the first is that there's a number of ways we can look at this. We are currently looking at real GDP, not nominal GDP, but we're also looking at GDP levels. So here we're able to see over time what's happening. In California, we can see it was hit during the Great Recession. However, you can see also Texas, there was a little bit of a dip here in 2008, 2009, a slowdown in its growth, but it is growing much faster. And that's also what I tried to do right here. So this row, this column here is showing the 10-year annualized growth rate. And I've got the formula up there. This comes in handy in all types of business applications, so it's a useful formula to have. But in essence, what it's doing is it's taking the 10 years of growth and it's annualizing the growth rate so that we can compare those growth rates across all these states. And exactly what we see in this chart is reflected here. The Texas growth rate for economic activity, for economic output, was almost 3% per year for the last decade, whereas in California it was just north of 1%, right? Just at 1%. That's a 1.5, almost a 2% per year difference in growth. Texas is growing, and like when I said it's the economic engine of America right now for California and Texas, Texas is growing leaps and bounds above most states. And you can see kind of that rating here across all these states. The only negative one here that we're looking at would be Michigan, which has really seen some contraction around the Detroit area, obviously, and I think that there's a few other states. If I just scroll down here, you can see Maine has also had a negative growth in terms of real GDP over the last decade. Everybody else has had some growth and just different levels of it. And you can see here, North Dakota is the clubhouse leader at 6.56% year over year annualized growth over the last decade. That is really coming from energy production and energy boom. And so we can look at it kind of in an annualized growth rate way. We can look at it based off the levels. We can look at it over time. All of these are useful. I've also got another way of looking at it here, and I'll just highlight that what we're taking a look at is, right, this is a little bit of a false comparison in that the data that we're looking at here is chain 2009 dollars, so this is real dollars based off of 2009 as the base year. Here the country data that we've looked at was based off the World Bank data, and that is based off of constant 2005 dollars. So the analysis is a little different, but the numbers are at least in the correct ballpark. And so I thought it would be a useful way of looking at this. We can see that California is roughly the size in economic output of France. Texas is roughly the size of the entire country of India, right? Canada and New York are relatively similar. And it gives you, I think, a better feel for how big are the states, right? What is the economic output of the 50 United States? It is gigantic when we start to control for some of these countries. We can see Indiana, for example, is roughly the same size economically speaking as South Africa. Arizona and Missouri are very similar in economic output to Iran, for example. And so I think that this is a useful comparison. You can kind of scroll down through this and pick out things that you think might be interesting. We were talking about North Dakota. It's a country that basically is about the size of Belarus when it comes to economic activity. However, the growth rate, I'm sure, is light years above what Belarus is seeing if we were to go back and do that math there. So this is just another way that we can use for comparison, and that's one of the nice things about GDP is that we can compare it over time. There's one other way that we can look at this. I've taken the same data and I've applied it into maps so that we can analyze it a little bit better. Here on the left, this is the state level, so this was the data that we were just looking at for 2013 in 2009 real dollars, and I've just compared it here in the state because what this shows is I think it's much easier to see that really, right, the not majority, I shouldn't say, but big chunks of our economic growth are coming from the places that you would expect, from California and Texas and New York and Florida and Illinois. We can see that coloration here as it's darker blue. It's a larger GDP. As it gets towards this yellow color, it's a smaller GDP. But then there's one other way that we could look at this, and we could control for the population of these states. We know that California is much larger, so we should expect that all of those additional people would consume more, and they would produce more, and they would invest more. And so when we control for population, in essence, when we take the GDP figures and we divide by the population, we get a much better feel for how these states actually interact, or what they look like compared with each other. So here you can see on the scale, this is $70,000 per person on a GDP level, so for every man, woman, and child, all the way down to 32. One of the things that's useful in seeing this is the big spread across countries. And what do we know? Well, Alaska is kind of the clubhouse leader here, but we also have on a per person basis, the energy boom of Wyoming and of North Dakota really stands out versus previously where this is really kind of a small amount. And then also, what do we have over here in the Northeast corridor? There is a lot of growth, a lot of GDP per person as well. So this is two different ways of really looking at the same data, 3 or 4 different ways actually of looking at the same data. And I just go through that so that one, we can see that it is comparable over time, and it's really useful to be able to see what the trends are in state level GDP or in country level GDP, but also that we can see that there are multiple ways, even once we have the GDP numbers, of analyzing that data, nominal versus real, looking at the levels versus a per capita basis, or even looking at growth rates and rates of change. And that's one of the most important things that we're going to be doing throughout macroeconomics.